right, here we are. We've made it to our last and final 14th lecture for this series of lectures, this course. Uh, really excited to wrap it up with you and finish it out with a cool lesson that kind of merges and brings us to where we are now in the modern era of East Asian medicine on some level. So we've really traversed so much time and space and history in this lecture series. And now in this last lecture, I wanted to spend some time just talking about, well, what is the state of East Asian medicine? What's happening with East Asian medicine now in the contemporary moment of time? That now that it has basically collided with the West, with Western science, with biomedicine, these two juggernauts of paradigmatic thought of medicine are sort of colliding, and they're both changing and being influenced by one another, in my opinion. And it's really, for me, kind of an exciting thing that we have the opportunity and privilege to work in this medicine field in a time when it's really fertile with new ideas, new concepts and perspectives. In my opinion, the West and the East, while they come from a different perspective in some levels, I don't think they're mutually exclusive by any means. In fact, I think that they, in a lot of ways, inform one another and fill in a lot of gaps and explain things in a different light. So for me, the fact that we have a chance to study things like acupuncture with Western and modern science concepts and methods is really exciting, because that's something that just has never happened in history in that way over this thousands and thousands of years long history that we just went through. So we actually kind of find ourselves in a really fascinating, unique moment out of all this time periods that we've overviewed. It's a really unique moment to live and practice acupuncture and East Asian medicine, in my opinion. So let's kind of jump into this lecture, and we're just going to sort of briefly go over some of the cool topics that that I included in the lecture. And we're mostly going to be focused on acupuncture. And there's a lot of other things that we can talk about too. There's a lot of science and stuff that is done with herbal medicine, but kind of left this lecture is really focused on acupuncture. So this presentation, like I said, focuses on acupuncture research, even though it's important to know that there's a lot of cool and important science being done, especially with herbal medicine, like network, like understanding how herbs synergize with one another. You know how like herbal medicines are synergistic formulas with multiple components. So there's a lot of science that's being done on each individual herb, which is really amazing for our knowledge of the individual herbs and their constituents, but also the formulas themselves. So it's like each herb has all these little constituents in it, but then each formula is made of multiple herbs. So it's this very complex network science, and it's trying to understand sort of the synergies of that and many other things. There's a lot of great science on herbal medicine, but we're going to focus on acupuncture in this lesson here. And so some of the topics of this lesson include a few of the theories that are out there about the mechanisms of action of acupuncture, according to the scientific study that's being done and the research that's being done. They're trying to understand it from a scientific perspective, as opposed to a qi perspective, which in my opinion, the concept of qi, it was really never meant to be a scientific term. It's not. It doesn't take anything away from that concept that it's not a scientific term. It's just was never meant for that. And so, they're trying to understand acupuncture from a Western biomedical perspective. It doesn't, take away anything from qi. I think all the valuable theories of the medicine of systematic correspondence are still valid and valuable in their own way. It's just another perspective, and it's a new fertile way to approach this tradition, this technique of acupuncture. So we're going to also take a look at a few research trends in acupuncture, and that's sort of like a bibliometric analysis. It's sort of like analyzes how much research is done on the topic of acupuncture over time. which I think is just an interesting thing to look at. We're going to also look at some of the ways that acupuncture affects some of the overall systems of the body, like the neuroendocrine immune systems, how it interacts with things that affect inflammation, like pretty high level kind of systems in the body. And we're also going to take just a quick look at some of the neuroimaging research in acupuncture, which for me is just like, I think that's just such a cool field of research in the acupuncture field. And we're going to look at some of how the acupuncture research, how it understands acupuncture affects the autonomic nervous system. So some of these are like really important little subgenres of how of research that's being done on acupuncture. There's a lot of research that's being done on acupuncture. People are trying to understand acupuncture for treating specific diseases or specific disorders. There's research that's being done to try to understand, well, how does acupuncture work? And then that's a whole can of worms that opens up a lot of other questions. So it's just like a big topic of research. There's a lot of different pathways that you can go down. We're not going to go down every single one. You could look at acupuncture for the cardiovascular system, acupuncture for gastrointestinal disorders, etc., fertility, etc., 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 cancer, all these different things. But I picked some topics that are sort of like high level, in the sense that when you affect the nervous system or the endocrine system or the immune system or inflammation, you're kind of affecting everything. So I like that kind of stuff. It's sort of like the top-down approach of like understanding the big ways that acupuncture has a systemic, holistic effect. So just generally on the topic of the science of acupuncture, from the 50s to the 70s, there was a lot of effort that was focused on building like the educational and clinical infrastructure of acupuncture. It was systematizing theories, conducting initial clinical observations. A lot of this work was being done in China with like the CCP and the People's Republic of China. And then later in that century, in the 60s to the 80s, there started to become more specific, kind of in-depth, deeper research into some of the mechanisms of acupuncture, and a lot of this centered around acupuncture anesthesia, which we mentioned last lecture, or in the lecture, not last lecture, but the lecture before that, number 12. Kind of some of the research that was being done in China with like the analgesia, and they were doing it for post-surgical pain and all this stuff, and that includes some of the insights into the way that acupuncture engages the central nervous system and the opioids in the body and stuff like that. And people were also studying the effects of herbs, the effects of needling on different organ systems. And then coming closer to the 21st century in the 80s and 90s, the trend has exploded with rigorous scientific validation. There's a lot more evidence now for acupuncture. It was really difficult to kind of have a scientific conversation for many decades about acupuncture, because it's extremely difficult to actually study acupuncture. And I teach the research course at the Wan Institute too, and one of the things that we focus on in that course, that I kind of put some stuff in that course about this topic, is that there's a lot of paradoxes and difficulties in the methodology for studying acupuncture with science. It's not like just studying a drug where you can easily have a placebo. You just give somebody a sugar pill, and then you can separate the effects of the drug from whatever perceived placebo effects might be operating. But that's very difficult to do with acupuncture. It's actually extremely hard to design an adequate placebo for acupuncture. First off, the acupuncturist cannot really be blinded. They know if they're giving a placebo acupuncture session. If they're giving fake acupuncture, you're going to know if you're the acupuncturist. So it's very like, how do you design a double-blinded study, right, under those conditions? But even beyond that, it's hard to pass off the placebo acupuncture, the sham acupuncture as they call it, for the patient. But even if you're able to do that, there's a lot of speculation that even the ways of doing placebo or sham acupuncture aren't really effective, because sometimes they do sham acupuncture where they're like, oh, we'll just do acupuncture on like a point that's like on a random place in the body, or we'll do some other kind of sensory engagement with the body, but there's still things happening to the body, so it's difficult to disengage those mechanisms that are still being engaged by the sham acupuncture. So what ends up happening when people make these studies and with using these kind of maybe not so great methodologies is that a lot of times the sham acupuncture has positive effects and so does the real acupuncture, and then critics of acupuncture say that, oh well, it must be due to placebo. But actually, it's really, in my opinion, the actual root issue is that it's just extremely difficult to design a rigorous acupuncture, double blind, clinically controlled, randomized trial for acupuncture. It's not like just studying a pill or a pharmaceutical drug. There's a lot more difficulties and paradoxes that go with designing the methodology. So that's just kind of like a rant on sort of the difficulties in the field of studying acupuncture. And there's been like huge progress over the decades in the acupuncture research community. I can only really speak for the research community in the United States because I'm not really like tapped into China and other countries, but I know that like there's a big group of various research teams in the US, and over the decades they've really honed in the methodology and like the best practices for performing acupuncture research studies. So that's improved by like a huge margin. A lot of the studies that were done over previous decades, even into like the 2000s, sometimes like the methodologies were not very good. Either they didn't adequately blind things, or the allocation procedures were not very good. Basically, the methodologies of the study left holes in it, and basically it made it so that the results were not as accurate as maybe it could have been. So the community themselves have created lots of really good guidelines for researchers, and the result of that is that higher quality studies are constantly being done and released and published. So the research quality, in my opinion, of all acupuncture research across the board has steadily and often dramatically improved over time. So that's just kind of like a side for just talking about the research in general about acupuncture. But let's just kind of jump into sort of research trends from like a numbers perspective. There's a few good, there's some good bibliometric studies that have been published. This one was done around 2020 or something like that, and it looked at the number of randomly controlled trials that are done about acupuncture over like the past 20 years. And so this is a great graph showing the number of RCTs done over the years. And I think that, okay, so this kind of like, they only measured up to like halfway through 2019, so that's why this bar is only halfway. But theoretically, I mean, I imagine that this trend just continues somewhat. But as you can see, the amount of studies being published is just increasing year over year over year, basically. We've gone from like 50 or 60 or 70 studies to now there's like 350 studies, and maybe even more now that it's been a few years since this. So they say that it has largely increased, and there was an exponential earlier growth, and now there's a steady high volume output of acupuncture studies. So great trend in the realm of number of acupuncture research studies being done. And so that's just great to see. It's a healthy, vibrant field of research. This is another study which did some bibliometric analysis. This one used like machine learning tools to perform different kinds of analyses, and I'm going to show some really cool kind of visualizations and graphs on the results from this study. This is the source here. And so they say that acupuncture therapy has obtained increasing attention over the past 2 decades. Most of the studies focus on mechanisms, especially the analgesic and anti-inflammatory mechanisms. More researches such as neurotransmitter will continue to advance. Besides meta-analyses and literature reviews, are increasingly common, and that provides more comprehensive and credible evidence for acupuncture therapy. And that's because meta-analyses are like the gold standard. They compile a lot of data together. Literature reviews are really great for basically bringing together all of the information and knowledge of the field into one study, one review. So those are great kinds of studies to be published. They really elevate the field whenever a high quality meta-analysis gets published. That's awesome. And so the fact that these kinds of things are being published is a really good sign as well. And so this shows that there is a lot of also attention that's being done specifically on like analgesia and pain topics, inflammation, and when they say neurotransmitter, there's a lot of studies being done trying to understand the neurological components of acupuncture. That's become kind of a hot topic. This is another cool graph from the same study, and this is sort of showing the trends of different maybe like terms in the research or topics of research. So acupuncture points, treatment outcomes, electroacupuncture, randomly controlled trials. These are big research topics, as well as things like pain medicine, studies on the acupuncture meridians, adolescence, quality of life. Those are all top terms. So just interesting to note those important terms are prevalent in the literature. And then here's a cool heat map that they created from all the different terms and stuff. So the darker blue, the less of it there is. The more red, the more of it is. And yeah, you can see this heat map for a lot of these really important terms over the years, and kind of get an idea of like how prevalent those terms are at certain periods. So there were a lot of literature reviews published maybe around this period, and there were a lot of comparative efficacy studies around this period, et cetera, et cetera. Apparently there's a lot just in general of that. And biochemical analysis, symptomatic treatment. So that's another cool visualization that they had in that study that I'm pulling from. And this kind of just displays all of that stuff just in a different form. And this lets you kind of see some of the different big terms that are being done here in a lot of the research. So you have a lot of those terms that we just saw in that heat map showing up in this interesting mind map here. So that's just a really great study. I just found this one really interesting. And this is also a really valuable map here that shows where a lot of the research is done. And so a lot of it's being done in the United States. There's a little bit being done in, say, like different places in Europe. That looks like Germany, and maybe like the UK. There's some good acupuncture research being done. And to a lesser extent, maybe even like France and Russia and Brazil and Australia. And then probably number one, according to here, is China. Looks like South Korea and Japan do some research studies as well. Actually, South Korea looks like they do quite a bit, maybe a little bit less than the United States. But from this graph, it really shows that like number one is probably China, number two, the United States, and then we have another maybe group of countries like Germany, UK, South Korea, and some other countries following that. So that's where a lot of the research is being done. This was just, I kind of just pulled up sort of a brief overview of just like what are a lot of the individual disorders that are being researched for acupuncture, and maybe where some of the levels of evidence are. And so there's actually at this point quite a few different disorders where there's a lot of strong evidence for acupuncture. And in fact, a lot of insurance has added acupuncture. A lot of insurance providers add acupuncture for certain kinds. I would think maybe some of the ones that show up on top here, various kinds of pain, like maybe low back pain, knee osteoarthritis. There's good evidence for migraines and headaches, tension headaches, post-operative nausea and vomiting. Maybe cancer-related fatigue. It's become a very useful modality as like a complementary for people going through cancer therapies. menopausal symptoms like hot flashes, female infertility. It's used so often to help people going through like IVF and stuff like that. Chronic prostatitis, chronic pelvic pain syndrome, neck and shoulder pain. These are all kind of like moderate, and there's potential. So I expect probably, there's probably going to be ongoing good research being done also about these things like post-operative pain, fibromyalgia, neck and shoulder pain. I mean, I treat so many people for neck and shoulder pain. I can't imagine that is not going to get proven that it's going to work, because I literally just cure people's neck and shoulder pain like nobody's business. It's like that's one of the things. It's, as an acupuncturist, you could probably read this list and be like, yeah, that's obvious. But in the research community, we have to show proof and like really create a rigorous research proof for these things. Even though, as a practitioner, like, oh yeah, obviously, I'm going to be able to help people with sleep issues. I'm going to be able to help people with neck and shoulder pain and headaches. As an acupuncturist, that's obvious, but that's just part of engaging with science, is we have to do research and show that there's objective proof for that. So let's just kind of overview some of the various scientific sort of theories that are out there. There's, whenever there's something that's being studied and we're trying to understand the mechanisms for how acupuncture works from a science perspective, people put forth theories. Like first as a hypothesis, but then as a theory, as it sort of gets fleshed out and there starts to become some evidence for it. There are a few different theories for the mechanism of effect for acupuncture. So number one, there's what could be called the neurophysiology model. And essentially that's the theory that acupuncture stimulates peripheral sensory nerves and central nervous system pathways. It triggers neurotransmitter releases like endorphins and opioids. It modulates pain signals, autonomic reflexes, anti-inflammatory / trophic or tissue nourishing responses for analgesia. It has neuroregulation effects and long-term effects like reduced inflammation. And there's a lot of different research that you can look up about this. Here's just an interesting article about acupuncture's neuroanatomic and neurophysiological basis. And I'm not going to go through each of these. This is just kind of an abstract for that paper. There's a lot of different articles and papers about similar or related topics to the neurophysiologic model of acupuncture. But yeah, this is just one example. And so I just included that as an example of an abstract from a reviewed article that is sort of about this theory. Another theory is called the connective tissue model, and this is a model that I know is comes from a lot of the research done by this researcher whose last name is Langevin, and she has done pretty amazing research and put forth a theory that a lot of the effects of acupuncture happen through the interaction between the needle and the connective tissue, or the fascia, or the collagen, basically the ground substance where the needle engages with your body. And so this theory puts forth the idea that needle insertion and manipulation, such as acupuncture needle rotation, what it does is it mechanically couples with the extracellular matrix and collagen fibers in your fascia or your connective tissue. And this causes the sensation of needle grasp, which you can think of as the de chi sensation. And that causes tissue winding around the needle. It causes deformation of your tissues. And this has mechanotransduction effects on your cells and your fascia and your tissues. This has other effects, like it creates a cascade of effects. So it activates like your fibroblasts and your cytoskeletal, has cytoskeletal changes to your cellular architecture. It creates signaling cascades, which are the mechanosensitive channels, and that has effects downstream. So this has downstream local and also remote effects on like things such as blood flow, reduced inflammation, cellular remodeling. Basically, it activates the deep level systems of your body through that connective tissue activation and connection, the mechanotransduction effect. So that is a really cool theory as well. And these are a couple examples of some of the research done by Helene M. Langevin, who I definitely recommend, as an acupuncturist, go read this kind of research. It's just really fascinating, awesome stuff. And it will, I mean, for me as an acupuncturist, I'm just looking for as much information as possible from every single possible source about acupuncture, whether that's traditional, classical, modern, contemporary, scientific, whatever. I just want everything. I just want to consume it all. And so I love this stuff. It's really educational, and it gives me a lot of knowledge, not just about acupuncture, but about the human body. It has furthered my education. So can't recommend the research by the Langevin team enough. And this is a couple of the a couple pictures from another source that sort of shows a little bit visually what's happening there with the connective tissue model. It's like first you have the needle, it goes into your connective tissue, and maybe there's a manipulation and you retwist it. And what happens is all of these fibroblasts and collagen fibers and all these things twist around the needle. It activates mast cells and starts activating the local immune system. It creates all these local effects, and that also creates systemic effects. So, and then this one shows that there's different phases to the actual acupuncture insertion. So the morphing phase, the insertion happens, and it changes the architecture of the tissue. And then you have a pull-out phase. And so all these mechanical things are happening while that's occurring, and it's creating mechanotransduction effects down the chain, because all of your connective tissue and your fascia is interconnected in this giant tensegrity network. So if you change one aspect of it, even on a minimal deep level or a minimal tiny level, it's going to have effects that cascade through the whole system. So it's just a really fascinating subject. I definitely recommend it for everybody who's interested. Then there's another theory called the growth control model, and this postulates that acupuncture points and meridians align with remnants of embryological organizing centers and growth boundaries that persist post-development. Needling influences a macroscopic bioelectric growth control network involving high electrical conductance, gap junctions, and morphogens, regulating physiological processes like hypertrophy, repair, apoptosis, and homeostasis beyond embryogenesis, encompassing neurophysiological and connective tissue aspects for broader systemic regulation. So this theory is bringing like an embryological approach to it. That's just another fascinating theory for how acupuncture may or may not work, and that's a theory that also has to do with the acupuncture meridians. And so they're trying to put forth this theory that it all goes back to the embryology of the body, which is pretty profound. It's a pretty profound theory to put that out there. So this is an interesting paper that, if you want, you could read, that maybe talks about that a little bit, by Shang. So those are some of the theories, the different theories of acupuncture's effect. Maybe there's more. I'm sure there are, but those are the three that I included in this lecture. So, and also, a lot of people combine different aspects of all these different theories and are trying to put forth sort of like a unified theory, just like all other fields of science. That's kind of the way that science goes. People put forth compelling theories, and then more research is done. Sometimes aspects of those theories get thrown out as really not important. Other times they end up being true. And sometimes different theories might disagree, but at the end, sometimes different aspects of them become unified and people find a way to synthesize them. So this is all an ongoing process as acupuncture science progresses and more research is done. But one thing that's for sure is that there's a lot of really great research being done on how acupuncture engages important systemic parts of the body, like the neurological system, the endocrine system, the immune system. And this has been ongoing for decades. And so we now know that acupuncture has a lot of regulatory and modulatory effects on the neuroendocrine immune network and these systems. And those are obviously important systems. I can't really think of anything that doesn't involve at least one of those systems, but probably all of them, because they're all interconnected, right? So, have a lot of the acupuncture research necessitates this systems-based approach. And I just find it fascinating how acupuncture, being so holistic, is sort of forcing a scientific approach that is itself holistic. It's forcing science to approach the complexity of acupuncture in the body from a more holistic, systemic, and systems theory approach instead of a very reductionist approach. So I just find that fascinating. To me, that says that acupuncture is really influencing science and is having exerting its own effect, because in order to understand something so complex, people are having to uh, adopt holistic models, basically. And this is a great kind of general chart of just many of the different molecules, the chemical messengers, the neuroendocrine immune chemical signaling molecules that we know get affected by acupuncture. They get modulated, and maybe they get excited, or maybe they get depressed. It releases more of them, or it lowers the amount of them that are circulating. And maybe sometimes in the case of dopamine here, it does both, because sometimes depending on the context, of the patient, maybe it will upregulate or downregulate them. So it's very interesting to see how acupuncture has these very complex effects on things like your nervous system and your immune system and your endocrine system, and all the different chemical signaling molecules that are so intricately involved. And these are things that are like, very important research topics, even outside of acupuncture, like that, like the way that the nervous system works, and neurology is very focused on neurotransmitters. It's a huge thing in the discourse, even the public discourse. If we listen to these very popular scientific podcasts or lectures, these are just important topics that come up for health and lifestyle and stuff. And so it's great to know that acupuncture has potentially really powerful effects on things like the endogenous opioid system, or these neurotransmitters that are involved in complex diseases like depression and stuff, addiction, various issues like the HPA axis, and that has a bearing on stress conditions and trauma, the endocannabinoid system, lots of different immune modulating chemical messengers and things of that nature. So, you have melatonin. People are just popping that stuff as a pill. So it's like we can affect this stuff with acupuncture, and the science is showing that. Basically, it's really really cool. And of course, when it comes to neurotransmitters, one of the most, I would say, like archetypal, well-known, well-researched, basically completely proven neurotransmitter molecule are the endogenous opioids. And this has been something that's been studied for decades now. It's been studied since acupuncture analgesia has been a topic for decades, all the way back to China. And so, this is one of the most researched topics in acupuncture. It's basically proven completely at this point. And so now, we know that acupuncture stimulates the release and activity of endogenous opioids, beta endorphins, enkephalines, endomorphins, dynorphins, a well-established mechanism in research for its analgesic effects. And this is a topic that you can really go into deeply, actually, because the research has really gone to a very in-depth level. Like, for example, if you read the studies where they do electroacupuncture, they now know through the research that specific electroacupuncture frequencies, or different settings on your device, will actually release different endorphins, different opioids. So depending on how you do your electroacupuncture, it will actually stimulate different fibers, which will release different opioids more so than others. So you can actually fine tune your electroacupuncture treatments utilizing the understanding and the science that has been uncovered about it, and really very very specifically kind of biohack someone's endogenous opioid system, which is amazing, miraculous that we can have that level of fine tuning and control in our acupuncture treatments. So if you know for a fact that you want to release certain types of endogenous opioids over others for various reasons, which you would have to study each of these to understand their particular characteristics, but say you want to, release dynorphins or beta endorphins, you can actually tune your electroacupuncture machine to stimulate that acupuncture point in a specific way to make a certain opioid be released and not another one. So that to me is just absolutely insane and cool, and there's research that you can find on that. This is just one example of just like a brief, just like a little overview of the endogenous opioid system and how acupuncture induces it. A topic that I thought I would just like briefly mention, which is just very interesting to me, and I use this as sort of like a scientific framework to understand acupuncture from a Western biomedical point of view. I find this topic called psychoneuroendocrine immune. That is a really important to me systems theory framework for understanding acupuncture, because it's really PNEI, psychoneuroendocrine immunology, is an interdisciplinary scientific field that combines all these things, and it studies the bidirectional interactions and integration among these four systems. So basically the idea is that your nervous system, your psyche, your endocrine system, and your immune system are all intricately interconnected. They cannot be separated. So those are like the most important high-level systems, deep-level systems of your body. And just from those four things alone, you can pretty much theorize that maybe if acupuncture is having a psychoneuroendocrine immunological effect, it's essentially having an effect on the whole system, your whole physiology. So I just think that in a sense, for me, I feel like acupuncture sort of it provides empirical evidence for psychoneuroendocrine immunology, and it demonstrates how something like a non-pharmacological intervention like needle stimulation can restore balance across the entire PNEI system. It promotes anti-inflammatory, analgesic, mood regulation, and adaptive effects. This integration, this concept, for me, sort of bridges the traditional East Asian holistic concepts with modern systems biology. So I just really like psychoneuroendoimmunology for that reason. It's sort of, for me, like a conceptual bridge where we can connect these two different paradigms in some kind of a meaningful way. So I just wanted to share that cool thing with you. For me, when it comes to the research into acupuncture, one of the things that excites me the most is the fMRI research, the neuroimaging research that's being done on people's brains when they get acupuncture. And there's a lot of it being done on various different things. But one study that I really like is called Acupuncture, the Limbic System and the Anticorrelated Networks of the Brain. And it shows that when people get acupuncture, there's a specific brain regional network that gets activated. And actually, what's the most interesting about this to me is that, so when you activate the chi, when you get the de chi sensation, this is the brain network that is observed with acupuncture, and it's very specific regions of the brain, and these regions are important. But what's also fascinating is that there's an opposite network of the brain that gets that gets activated when sharp pain is elicited. So you can do acupuncture on someone, but if you get the de chi, you're going to have a completely different brain network activation response than if you cause sharp pain with your needling. So to me, that places so much emphasis on the skill of the practitioner, the needling technique. You have to be good at acupuncture, and you have to make sure that you're attaining the chi, but you're not causing unnecessary sharp pains, because if you do those two things, you're going to have two different neurological responses. So I love this kind of stuff. Basically, de chi has a different effect than pain when needling. And so acupuncture often deactivates the limbic affective areas. This is the interior cingulate cortex, the amygdala, the insula, the prefrontal cortex, while activating and modulating somatosensory regions. This contrasts with sham acupuncture, which may show less specific or different patterns. And in pain models or chronic conditions, acupuncture normalizes aberrant activity or connectivity in pain processing regions, supporting analgesia via descending modulation. So, this research is great. It's like trying to understand like what is the neurological and brain effects of acupuncture, and how does that tie into what we're observing with things like pain and analgesia. Some of these brain regions are well known for their importance in like emotional processing, stress processing, trauma, all these really kind of important topics, and they'll have effects on inflammation, all these things, processing of all sorts of different stuff. And so this brain network, it's like a neuromatrix that is kind of specific to acupuncture. There's like an acupuncture neuromatrix, and that's just really, really cool that we're figuring this stuff out. And so this is the abstract of this study, and I highly recommend that everybody goes and reads this study. It's just really, really cool, really, really cool research. This is another picture from the study, which shows how the anti-correlated network, the brain network, the neuromatrix of the brain that's related to acupuncture, has a lot of functional similarity to what's called the default mode network. And so in post-acupuncture, there's sustained changes in large-scale networks, such as increased connectivity in anti-nociceptive pathways, like the periaqueductal gray, the hypothalamus, and a modulation of intrinsic networks like the default mode network. So that's an important neuromatrix that there's a lot of research that's done on. So acupuncture is modulating the DMN, the default mode network. And you can read more and research more about the default mode network. It's really interesting. It's often decreased connectivity or deactivation linked to reduced self-referential processing and relaxation. It also modulates the salience network, which has insula involvement in processing salient stimuli like needle sensation, and also the sensory motor network. So these complex brain networks, which even aside from acupuncture, there's like all this research being done on these fascinating complex neuromatrices to understand the functional connectivity of the brain. Acupuncture has effects which directly modulates these networks, and it shows up in functional MRI imaging. So the studies portray acupuncture as inducing a dynamic network level reconfiguration from peripheral somatosensory input to central modulation of pain, affective, and cognitive circuits. Super duper cool, in my opinion. Another thing that's kind of goes along with the fact that, if acupuncture's influencing your psycho, endo, neuro, immunological systems, well, it has powerful immune inflammatory effects. And there's lots of research that shows that. There's tons of research on acupuncture's effect on things like mast cells and other immune cells and immune signaling molecules. So the immune system and the inflammatory system are like this. And this is an article about how acupuncture changes the local microenvironment and the systemic immunity after acupuncture stimulation during inflammation. This is a literature review on animal studies. And so overall, acupuncture promotes anti-inflammatory homeostasis by bridging neural signals to endocrine and immune regulation. It offers a non-pharmacological option for chronic inflammatory states. I mean, can you think of anybody who cannot benefit from reducing their chronic inflammatory state? We live in a period of chronic disease epidemics, and so the fact that without any drugs whatsoever, we can, with a non-pharmacological approach, directly modulate the most important systems of somebody's entire physiology, reducing inflammation, through things like pro-inflammatory cytokines and markers and anti-inflammatory cytokines, immune cell modulation, systemic pathways. We can do this with acupuncture. What a powerful thing. What an amazing scientifically backed skill that we are participating in. I just love it. I love this kind of science. So this is why I'm sharing it with you. basically, a big topic of this, all this acupuncture research stuff is really just the effects that it has on the autonomic nervous system. So acupuncture is modulating the autonomic nervous system. That's like the deepest reflex of your nervous system. It's spontaneous. It's like you can't control it yourself. We can modulate the deep parts of your nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is a diffuse network that regulates physiological systems to maintain bodily homeostasis by integrating inputs from the internal and external environment, including the sympathetic, parasympathetic, and enteric nervous systems. Recent evidence suggests that the autonomic nervous system is one of the key neural pathways for acupuncture signal transduction, which has attracted worldwide attention in the acupuncture field. So, pretty awesome stuff. If you're this abstract says that autonomic nerve related disorders such as cardiovascular disease, epilepsy, anxiety, nervousness, circadian rhythm disorders, polycystic ovarian syndrome, subfertility. Think of how many things are downstream of a dysregulated nervous system. That is the control center of your whole system, and acupuncture can directly tap into that system from the outside, from far away. It's pretty miraculous. It's pretty amazing. It is something to be really appreciative of. And, I just love how, even reading back in the oldest texts of acupuncture, after they would say something so profound, they'd be like, wow, it's like a spiritual miracle. It's like you know, so wondrous, so profound. And even back then, they knew how amazing the effects of acupuncture were. And I just think this stuff really, this kind of science to me really is impactful and hammers that in a modern way. And piggybacking off of the autonomic nervous system topic, a really popular kind of subfield of acupuncture research has to do with auricular research. When I went recently to the Society of Acupuncture Research conference this past year in 2025, there were so many people presenting research that had to do with auricular, vagal responses. So I didn't expect that. For me personally, I love ear acupuncture. I love auricular acupuncture, but it's not like my main topic of interest because, for me, I mostly needle points on the body at large. And for me, the ear acupuncture is sort of an additional thing that I do sometimes for certain reasons. But in the research scientific community, what I found was there is a lot of interest in auricular acupuncture. And so tons of research about it because the auricular acupuncture has a lot to do with the vagal response and vagal regulation. And so because of that, it has a lot of autonomic nervous system interactions. So acupuncture modulates the autonomic nervous system in a bidirectional context dependent manner, often promoting parasympathetic or vagal dominance for relaxation, anti-inflammatory, homeostatic effects, while also engaging sympathetic pathways descending or depending on acupoint stimulation, intensity, and condition. And the reason is that auricular ear acupuncture stimulation is particularly popular due to its direct link to the auricular branch of the vagus nerve, innervating concha slash symba-concha regions, and this includes points like the very famous Shen Men. And this forms the auriculovagal afferent pathway. So that's why so many people are so crazy about auricular acupuncture research, because there's a specific vagus nerve pathway that goes to the ear. And so I guess for scientists and researchers, they love that stuff because they're like, this makes sense to my brain. And so they are happy to study that because to them it represents a meaningful, direct way to, just from the ear, you're directly interacting with a branch of the vagus nerve and affecting the entire autonomic nervous system. I mean, makes sense, doesn't it? It's pretty cool, pretty awesome stuff. It's like, who knew that, like, your ear, it's like in Men in Black, how, like, the alien's face opens up from the ear. It's like your ear is like the control panel to your brain from this research. I think that's so cool. You can just influence somebody's entire nervous system just going boop, boop, boop. Okay. So, pretty awesome stuff right there. So, that's kind of the last specific topic of research. But I just want to throw out that if acupuncture research interests you, I would just personally recommend going and joining the Society of Acupuncture Research. The Juan Institute is a member, an institutional member, but I'm also like an individual member. And I went to the conference in 2025. It was awesome. The 2026 conference is in China, so I'm probably not going to be attending that one. It's a little bit too far away from me. But fun fact, what I learned at the conference in 25 was that the next Society of Acupuncture Research conference in 2027 is going to be in Salt Lake City, Utah. And that just happens to be the city that I personally live in. So I would love to invite all of you to come to the 2027 Acupuncture Society for Acupuncture Research conference. I'm definitely going to be there because it's going to basically be in my hood. So come on through and sign up for this great community. The research conference. I had so much fun. It was just really a good. Had a really good time just being in a giant space with a bunch of acupuncture nerds. I'm like, I'm home. This is great. You know, I did a little bit of I made like a poster with the Juan Institute and presented it, and it was just a really good time. I met some cool people and made some contacts, and so I definitely just recommend it. It's just it's a great thing. You also get CEUs when you do it, so it's not like it's just money not well spent. You get to apply the stuff that you attend at the conference to your CEUs. So just can't highly recommend this enough. It's a great networking opportunity and research organization in the field of acupuncture. A lot of the people who are involved in this are doing some of the best research in the acupuncture field, in my opinion. So check it out. So just some conclusions for our humble little lecture today. Number one, there are multiple promising theories and research investigating into the mechanisms of acupuncture, but research is still ongoing and challenges exist. But, in my opinion, the research community of acupuncture is pretty ingenuitive and intelligent, and over time they have continued to increase the level of quality of acupuncture research. Acupuncture research is a growing field of scientific research in the US, China, and many other countries, as we saw from that map, which is very positive. It's a great trend. Acupuncture has a system-wide effect describable in psycho-neuro-endo-immunological terms. Acupuncture is observed to modulate many neuroendocrine mediators. And of course, we know about its abilities to modulate the central nervous system, the autonomic nervous system. Neuroimaging research is yielding important results and insights into acupuncture's effects on the nervous system. And there are many popular fields of research today, such as the auricular vagal research, but you can get into any kind of research. And honestly, there's a lot of ways to research acupuncture. I saw some really great pragmatic studies. There's even if you just publish a case study, that is really awesome. So just highly recommend anybody that is into the research side of acupuncture to get involved in some meaningful way. It's just really cool, I think. Try to write an article, write a narrative review, write a case study, find a way to study it in some form, and that can add to the knowledge of the field. So get involved in the Society of Acupuncture Research. Well, that's the end of our lecture today, and I just want to say, if anybody watched this whole series to its entirety, I would just love to thank you for giving me your time and your energy and your attention. This was such a long series. I put so much work into it, and I'm just really grateful for everybody who stuck through and got something out of it and enjoyed it. I hope it was educational. I hope it was enlightening in some way. I hope it brought out some of the really amazing nuances of acupuncture and herbal medicine and East Asian medicine and the history of it. And I just hope that this was a valuable course for your education. If you're a student of acupuncture at the Juan Institute, I hope this course was valuable for you, and I'm really grateful to have had the opportunity to make it and to share all this stuff with you. So just want to say thank you, everybody. Thank you for your hard work and your attention, and all of the things that you did in the semester for the course. So thanks everybody, and so long. It's been great. It's been great doing it with you. So see you on the other side.